War in the Middle East has left many destitute and hopeless, but one Catholic cardinal refused to be a passive observer. Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pier Battista Pizzaballa, has been housing refugees, leading prayers for peace, and even offering to exchange his own life for hostages. We cover the impact his leadership could have on the faithful. Also, many were shocked to see their university sit on their hands while some student groups and faculty openly celebrated the deadly Hamas attacks. We break down how our once great universities degenerated into their current sad state of affairs, and that free speech does not mean freedom from consequences. Toss in some nostalgic JPII stories, Erika's suspicious Twitter activity, and an epic reporter takedown.
Currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm sure, this and that, right wing,
And you get this week's edition of the LOOPCast. Welcome back to the LOOPCast. Today I'm joined by my co-hosts Erika and Josh, and I have to say the juices are flowing today. We're just going to rip it here. We're going to cover a lot of elements, of course, of the fallout of the terrorist attack from Hamas to Israel. There's kind of new elements to this story as the domestic reactions are kind of boiling over a little bit, but one thing that we always like to highlight here at the LOOPCast are Catholic things, and especially when they're positive Catholic things. So one of the things that have really brought a lot of joy, I think, and a lot of light to the situation, maybe some hope for some people, is seeing about the Latin Patriarch of Israel. It's Pier Battista Pizzaballa is what we've been jokingly saying. Pizzaballa, I believe, is closer to the actual pronunciation. Erika can correct me there. But he has done a lot of what I consider heroic things in a time that it feels very hopeless. And so, Erika, what's this story going on with this patriarch, which is also just a sweet name?
Yeah, Patriarch is an awesome name, and I think I would prefer it to Archbishop.
I mean, that's what I call myself around the house, you know.
The Patriarch of the Mercer household, yeah, okay. So the Cardinal, like you said, he's actually the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, which is functionally, he's the Archbishop, not only for Israel, but also for all of Palestine and the country of Jordan and the island of Cyprus. So he's a really cool figure in that his office covers this whole troubled land, this part of the world that we've been covering. And in an interview that he gave last week, he actually offered himself as a ransom for the children being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. And this was just such a beautiful moment. It was kind of tacked on to the end of this longer interview, which had to do with the whole situation over there as he's seeing it as the father of the faithful, the Christian minority in the area. But it was just a beautiful moment. And I know I was like, yes, more of this, less of Synod, please. It was a light in my week, a very dark week. So to go through the interview, he was asked point blank if he would be willing to offer himself in exchange to free these children who'd been taken in the October 7th attack. And he declared, direct quote, "If I am ready for an exchange, anything, if this can lead to freedom and bring those children back home, no problem. On my part, absolute willingness." And so beautiful, wow. Right, Josh?
I'm thinking about like the, Boston Cardinal O'Malley, who sold he came into that archdiocese, huge scandal with the sex abuse stuff, and he sells the mansion that the Archbishop lives in as like a gesture of trying to like, hey, we're going to humble ourselves. That's giving up of a very nice palatial house. This man's willing to give up his life. Just amazing. That's not against O'Malley. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, but
no, I thought you were going to go more Maximilian Kolbe is kind of what comes to mind here in terms of offering for the prisons. For sure. But the stepping up on his part, and I think there's a few other notes that we want to have here. It's not just that he'd offer himself for the hostages. He's really stepped up and been a leader in the region for people that are suffering. And it's so inspiring to see. So Erika, what else is he up to?
Right. So he's also, and we talked about this getting ready for the show, right, Tom, about how everything we were trying to talk about in our first coverage of this last week, that the missing piece here is the humanization. There's been so much dehumanization on both sides, of the Israelis, dehumanization of the Palestinian people, not all of whom are Hamas, and we made that point last week. But the Cardinal is really sort of the embodiment of bringing that Christian understanding of the dignity of all people involved to the situation. So he also, in the same interview, he was talking about the real situation, boots on the ground over there, in particular for Christians. He said that there are about 1,000 Palestinian Christians who are sheltering in church buildings in northern Gaza. Their homes have been destroyed in Israeli strikes, or they live in vulnerable areas, and they can't leave. They won't leave. It's too dangerous on the roads. So he's talking about he's caring for not only Catholics, but also he has Orthodox that he's helping shelter, Protestant Christians he's helping shelter. And he also he was the first one to call for the worldwide day of prayer that we were talking about in the Loop this week. So
well, and it's just so everyone's clear too in the audience, like, we think it's okay. We're passing along what the Patriarch's saying, and there are points of critique on the Israeli side and obviously on the other side. That doesn't mean there's moral equivalency here. I mean, the thing is, like, I think a lot of supporters of Israel have a point when they say if Hamas gives up fighting, then there's peace. If Israel gives up, they're exterminated. I actually believe that point. That doesn't mean I necessarily want the United States to go to war with Israel or something like that. And so when we say, we're making some critiques here and there, it's not like it's in a moral vacuum or whatever. Like, we're not trying to present, both sides. We're not saying that. So anyway, just want to.
No, but I've seen a critique as well. We hold our allies to a higher standard. So Israel, we support. They're an ally. President Biden has made it very clear. He just took a trip over there. Because we support them, because we're intertwined, they are held to a higher standard in terms of response, in terms of attacks. And so what's going on here in Gaza is they're telling people to flee because they're going to bomb Hamas. And the problem with that is people can't flee, as Erika said, because Egypt will not take them right now. They've said they've closed off that border.
South, right?
Can't go, and they can't go south because they could get killed for being a Christian. So there are people, Christians, in that Gaza, totally packed in open air prison right now, not by their own choice, because they've been removed there from previous wars. Think of 1948. They ended up there not through their own choice, and now they can't go anywhere else.
Well, I thought it was that they were going to be bombing in the northern part of Gaza, so that, flee to the southern part of Gaza, because Gaza City is in the north. I thought that's what that was going on. It wasn't like they're going to go after the entire part at least to begin with.
But in this interview, though, the Cardinal makes the point that the Christians whom he's charged with caring for fear martyrdom in the south of Gaza because of the radical Islamic ideology there, that they fear being killed for being Christians. So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. You get bombed out in the north and your home is destroyed, or you go south and now you're the target. It's not so much hatred of the Jews as it is hatred of Christians down there. So it's a terrible situation to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point would be is you can't imagine Israel's not going to respond, though. So I would hope that the response is proportionate and that you try to do the best as you can. But you have the situation where Hamas is, they're in hospitals, and they're in schools and stuff like that, and they hold up children, so it's like it's hard to even attack your enemy. Like, they're holding up little kids, and it's like, I'm not saying that Israel's sinless, here, but it's a tough spot. I mean, I don't know. There doesn't feel like there's good answers. I don't know.
No, exactly. It doesn't feel like there's good answers, and that's why I think the call to prayer from the Patriarch as well was important. And even in a lot of the conversations I've had with people who listened to the episode that had very strong reactions to what we talked about, the one thing was very clear. They applaud and join us in the call for prayer for that region. I mean, truly, prayer is the most powerful force that we can contribute to this conflict. It's the only way for a lasting peace, in my opinion. But that being said, we are very clear what Hamas did and what Hamas does is despicable and evil. There's no two ways about it. Hiding in hospitals and schools is despicable and evil. What they did to the Israelis at the border, despicable and evil, and they need to be stopped. No one, I think, has a question about that. And I think that kind of leads into, first off, just wonderful story about the Patriarch. And I just love to see kind of that Catholic light in a darkness here of just trying to make the best and be pastoral in a hard situation. So I really applaud him for that. But that's kind of what's spilled over now into America. And this is an interesting element that now people are kind of discussing. There's been a lot of domestic pro-Palestinian marches going on, especially in colleges, but in very predominantly Middle Eastern populated areas. And that's really been hard, I think, especially for university settings, because many Ivy League universities have a lot of very prominent Jewish donors, Jewish beneficiaries. And they've been very frustrated with places, especially like Harvard, basically saying, well, the Palestinians kind of have a point. These people that are celebrating Hamas's attack very openly, some professors have been celebrating the attack. I think that's hard for a lot of people to swallow. And we kind of get back to another tough situation. I think a lot of people are really upset seeing this kind of celebrated in these colleges. Why do you think universities have been handling it the way that they have?
Well, I think Harvard just rediscovered their commitment to liberal discussion and free speech, right? Because they're saying, well, we think what Hamas did in Israel is terrible, but who are we to silence free speech for these students? So at Harvard, we had 34 student groups sign a letter praising Hamas, and the way that they framed it was Hamas's attack on Israel, in which 1,300 people, many women, children, elderly, were killed, was just a reaction to Israel's colonization. So this was a decolonization policy, and the student groups put out a letter and they blamed Israel entirely for the massacre of their own children, the massacre of their own people. It was quite the statement. It was absolutely stunning. Again, the university really dragged their feet on their response here. Finally, hedge fund CEO Bill Ackman, who is a Harvard grad, demanded that Harvard release the names of the student group members. So we have these 34 student groups. He's like, I want to know the names of the kids who are in these groups so that my company can avoid hiring them. The names were published. They were published, and now the student groups are crying, oh my gosh, we've been doxxed. We're being canceled. And one girl wrote a very sad op-ed about how she lost her internship at a New York law firm because she'd been on this, her name was on this signatory thing.
Oh, wait, activism has consequences? Gosh.
Wait, yeah, you have these like high moral principles for decolonization and the plight of Hamas, and now the consequences are too much for you?
Maybe we should ask her what she thinks about the CEO of Mozilla getting, ousted from his job for donating $1,000 for a marriage proposition back, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
right.
it is. There is a very rich irony in that, and that if I were to be very outspokenly pro-life and conservative in certain job circles, that would keep me from getting a job, no question. But that's just a reality. That's a reality I've accepted.
Yeah.
Like I'm okay with that. Those are places I probably don't want to work.
Yeah.
But people are kind of finding out, hey, if you celebrate terrorism, you might not get hired at your prestigious firm or whatever. And it's odd to witness that in real time. Like it should be, yeah, no duh.
Right.
Yeah, there's actually an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal from a UC Berkeley law professor who said, don't hire my students. The whole op-ed was, don't hire students from my law school because they're all terrorists and racist. It was super pointed. I'll link it in the notes. I know. It was pointed. So there are professors who are just like, this is ridiculous. So Harvard's not the only one. We've also got student demonstrations pro-Hamas. I wouldn't even say pro-Palestinian at this point. These demonstrations are actually pro-terrorist organizations.
Because they don't make any distinctions against the violence Hamas engaged in, right?
They don't make distinctions because that would require nuance of thought, which they're not taught to exercise anymore. We've got Cornell, Stanford.
There's a deep-rooted hatred, I think. For people that consider themselves Palestinian, there's a deep-rooted hatred for Jews and how they've handled the region. And they're unable to emotionally, I think, separate the fact that what needs to be done in their opinion in that region, if that's accomplished by Hamas, I don't think, at least many of the interviews that I've seen, they say you're asking the wrong question. You shouldn't ask if I'm pro-Hamas or anti-Hamas. You should ask if we should decolonize the region, which is kind of a cop-out way of saying, yeah, I kind of don't really have a problem with going on. And that's wrong. I mean, that's wrong and evil. So
Rod Dreher had an interesting column just this morning, actually, as we're recording. And it was talking about how in times of war, facts don't matter. So the idea that we draw our tribal lines, and this is sort of the phenomenon of the Middle East, right? That we draw our tribal lines so that it doesn't, in the end, like we can sit here all day and say, well, was it Israel who bombed the hospital or was it the Hamas who bombed the hospital by accident and all that. And in the end, the evidence won't matter. People have drawn their lines, and their information is totally filtered through their tribe, so that, yeah, the emotions are so high. And I think that's what you're saying, Tom, is that it doesn't really, these distinctions, but okay, not all Palestinians are Hamas, not all Palestinians are Arabs, not all are Jews, all of these distinctions don't actually matter to groups like this, to the students that we're seeing demonstrate. And that's a terrifying place to be.
Yeah, because I've seen stuff. Well, I've seen stuff the other way as well. I've seen Jews in New York say, kill the Palestinian dogs. I mean, it's so, again, it's kind of like the reverse of what the Patriarch is trying to do in the region, where he's there, boots on the ground, just trying to save lives, trying to advocate for peace. But people have the privilege in America to go to the extremes and advocate for death to a group of people in a region that they're not even living in. It's almost like they're insulated from the consequences. And America's been like that for a long time. It's almost like you have the privilege of safety, so you feel like you could say whatever you want. But if you were to be in that region and say that, I mean, I think your life would be a lot different. Let's put it that way. So that's kind of the fallacy, I think, of these. You look at the snowflake college students there that they have the privilege to say that because they know they're safe. So it's kind of sad to see, I think, advocation for such extreme death to a group of people in a place where they know there's not really consequences for saying that.
Yeah, and it bothers me. I've been seeing it on social media from some conservative commentators just being like, these are just kids. It's just students. They blow off steam during college. Oh, it doesn't really matter.
Hate that argument.
They're all going to grow up and pay taxes
so
and have kids. I'm like, well, one, they're not going to have kids if you've seen the demographic winter coming.
Right.
But two, like these.
That's the only good news.
What happens on college campus around, Josh?
I mean, this argument. Oh, they're just
special.
Oh, they're just kids. They're not da da da. They're just dumb and let them be stupid or whatever. It's like that's what conservatives have responded to the left-wing craziness on campus for over 30 years. And what happened? All these kids left the academy and went to work as DEI agents for all these corporations. Now all these corporations are woke because conservatives failed to address this 25, 30 years ago. Like I was fighting this kind of stuff back then, and I'm like, why? Hello, guys, who cares? And the conservatives like, let's just go make money in our jobs. Who cares? It's like, bro, stop it. Like, okay, so in this article, you're talking about with Hamas, like John Huntsman, he's a liberal, Mormon, Republican, whatever, ambassador. He's not going to give any money to the University of Pennsylvania anymore because he thought their response on Hamas was terrible. So he stopped giving them money. I'm like, hey, that's great. Thank you. He's like a millionaire, multimillionaire. But here's the deal, bro. You shouldn't have been giving him money, like, at all. Like 20 years ago,
Ever.
30 years ago. Like, wake up. It's not, I mean, how you think like University of Pennsylvania like suddenly just is pro-Hamas out of the middle of nowhere? Or like, give me a break. These guys were far left-wing like forever. Like, and you've been giving them money forever. It's like, it's an absolute, like the old governor of Michigan, John Engler, used to call the Ann Arbor 36 square miles surrounded on all four sides by reality. Like, that's what's going on. Like, wake up. Like, these universities, stop giving them money.
This didn't happen in a vacuum, right?
If you went to the University of Pennsylvania, if you're graduating from Michigan State or Ohio State or whatever, stop giving them money. Give money to Franciscan. Give it to Hillsdale. Do it somewhere else. Put your money in an oven and burn it rather than giving it to these left-wing colleges. I mean, give me a break. It drives me crazy.
Where's the, I know this is a complicated question, but if you could draw the line from how you get to university as maybe people understood it 40 years ago to universities openly supporting terrorism, how did we get to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like every good intention, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So after World War II, we say, well, all these men coming back, we want to make sure they get educated and let's get them white-collar jobs. Let's have a GI Bill. Isn't this great? I mean, first of all, you shouldn't have an economy that requires the vast majority of your people to go through 22 years of schooling. Not 22 years of schooling, but schooling until you're 22. It should be till about 18. That's what it used to be. And now we have this idea, because since the GI Bill, that everyone needs to go to college. And so we have Perkin grants and all these loans and all this stuff, and kids go to school. And all we care about is the acceptance rate, and how cool the classes are. We don't care about the graduation rate. And these kids are getting saddled with big debt. So I know there might be some boomers who are listening to this podcast, and you hear these kids, they're 20 years old and they're complaining about how much debt they have. Actually, they're right. Okay. And this is one where stop scolding them. You should get loans. Here's the deal. They've been sold a rotten bill of goods. Most of the universities aren't nearly as good as they were 20 years ago. Certainly not as good as they were 40 or 50 years ago. So when you went to college, colleges were a lot better. Number one. Number two, the price has gone up so high because government has been giving away free loans, and they don't care. And we don't hold the universities responsible for for not graduating people. And so the whole system is really starting to fall apart. And we should actually feel sympathy for, if you're an 18-year-old kid and you walk into a bank and you say, I want to start a business, can you lend me $100,000? The bank will be like, what? No? I'm like, $100,000? What? Hello? Do you have any collateral? Give a house or anything? The bank would be like, you're out of your mind. But we see an 18-year-old kid, we're like, oh, you want to go study gender studies at Penn State. Oh, you want to study underwater basket weaving? Sure, here's $100,000. Like, what? It's so bizarre. So
yeah, Josh, I understand that element of it, but in terms of the ideological, because I don't think 40, 50 years ago there'd be open celebration of terrorism.
So during the Vietnam War, you had all these radical kids, and they did sit-ins, and they're protesting that the universities were, research labs for the military-industrial complex and how evil this was. And they realized, wait a minute now, the teaching profession is where it's at, because, you work, 9 months a year, the other 3 months a year, you can plot all your political plans. And they just took over all the universities. They refer to it as like the long march through the institutions. Like they just took control of, where are you never going to see any, like, not just conservatives, but like common sense, middle of the road type people, just Joe Six-Pack common sense. You're never going to find that at the university. Even most schools, like you go there and public schools, they don't, what? Like all these crazy ideas. And so it's a race to the bottom. And you have this thing where liberals have taken over everything. And not even liberals now. It's...
Right. Here's my direct line. So I would say that the universities, you go back to when I was in school, the late 90s, early 2000s, and you had this sort of political correctness was the catchword, right? So we got to be politically correct and use all the right terms. And they were always changing too. So you had to is it Indians, Native Americans, indigenous peoples? It's your guess. And just watch the Washington Post. They'll tell you what the latest is. But we're now seeing political correctness on crack. Like wokeness is political correctness just taken and blown out of proportion. So where did political correctness come from? It was basically just we're seeing in America the flourishing, finally, in the late 90s, early 2000s, of this total abandonment of the idea of truth, right? And we're seeing the idea that it's just my truth, it's your truth, it's my feeling, your feeling. We're teaching our kids to understand themselves based on these identities and this intersectionality. And the long march through the institutions that Josh referenced, a lot of it has to do with, Marxism, this whole philosophy that is absolutely pagan and it is absolutely antithetical to the Judeo-Christian worldview, which founded universities in the first place, way back in the Middle Ages. So we're seeing now the direct line is that universities and institutions abandon the idea of objective truth, abandon the idea of universal morality, natural law, a very long time ago. And this is we're seeing the natural consequences of it, and of people who are convicted that there is truth, people who are convicted of morality, the long retreat from the universities. Like Josh said, conservatives kind of gave up the ghost back in the early 2000s. And, we didn't fight the culture where we didn't draw our lines in the sand, or there were very few voices. There were too few voices. especially here in America. Best book you can read about this, Awake Not Woke by Noel Meering of Theology of Home. I will post that in the link. So if you want, and it's actually very readable. It's not like, oh, Erika's saying we should read this history of American intellectual. No, it's really readable, super awesome. I will link it in the notes, Awake Not Woke. That's my plug. That's my line, Pogo.
I've observed some elements of both of what you've been saying recently. There was a video that came out where I think people paid to get like a whiteness training, essentially. So they'd sit at a dinner table with people from minority groups, and then they would just talk, and they would be told if something that they said had, whiteness associated with it or whatever. And one of the interesting lines that I heard in it was this white lady basically said something that felt totally normal. And then a minority lady across the table was like, what you just said was dripping with whiteness, and that was very white supremacist of you. And she said, well, this is exactly how I talk to my white friends. Why would it matter, who I say it to? And then she's like, oh, well, because yada, yada, oppression, this and that. And then they kind of did a side camera interview with the white lady, and she's like, wow, I didn't even really know, but I'm so glad that I'm getting educated on this now.
No, for Pete's sake.
And I think that's...
Oh, come on.
I know, I think that's
She
kind of the point.
Yeah, you win the argument before the words come out of the other person's mouth.
Exactly. And so it seems like, especially in a university setting, if you come up with, like in the example of the Native Americans, if you come up with the newest term that more properly defines an oppressed group, you now hold the power of the conversation. And you're more advanced and you're more learned than the people that are using the old antiquated terms for these group of people. And so you now have more pull and sway for that. And that's just one example, I think, of Josh's race to the bottom, where we now have these, political theorists that are saying, well, the decolonization effort in that region not only should be applied there, but in America, we need to decolonize. We need to give it back to these people. That's new, that's exciting, that's different. And so now all of a sudden, all the oppressed people flock to that ideology. That professor gets more pull. Maybe they sell some books. I mean, they are insulated from common sense, right? Because they get tenure.
And they give speeches at other colleges and get big speaker feedback.
Right. We've severed like the market correction essentially from these ideas and these people, right? Because if they're tenured and they're going to keep getting the fat checks from the government on student loans, they have no reason to change their tune. If anything, they're incentivized to be more radical, to get more attention, rather than, hey, this guy's crazy, I'm not going to support him.
Right.
So now they don't have a paycheck. So
2 thoughts on this to tie it back to the Patriarch and why what he said was so radical and not, I want to say refreshing. That sounds like it was a light in the darkness, right? That what Christianity brings to the table is it blows this oppressor versus oppressed out of the water, right? And like in Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither slave nor free. And I think what we're seeing in the Middle East and on our university campuses is it's just how radical what Christ was saying is. And as we see this kind of re-paganization of our country, the re-paganization of Europe, that Christian ethic is going to become more and more radical seeming, right? So when they say like we're radical traditionalists, I'm like, well, yeah, it is radical to say oppressed, oppressor.
Yeah.
We are all oppressed by sin. We are all oppressed by the evil one. And Christ frees us, right? He doesn't just make us now into the oppressors because, oh, he's going to give us power. He says, no, I'm freeing you from the whole dynamic of oppressed, oppressor. And that's what we got to be preaching to these kids is we need to get, Christ takes us out of that, and we are all victors in Christ. And I think that's what the Patriarch, for me, what he said about, I'll give my life for these kids. That's the answer. He's taking himself out, he's offering himself as a sacrifice for the both oppressed and oppressor. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's the only answer to this encroaching just ugliness that we're seeing in our colleges.
Yeah.
Woo, Pastor Erika.
That's beautiful.
We're the
That's
win.
beautiful.
Yeah,
and that's podcasting.
My motherly influence there. I just got to
take the lead of the Patriarch. Continue to pray for the region. I mean, I do so daily. If anything that comes from this podcast, more prayer, I think, would be the best possible scenario. We'll keep you updated on developments domestically and abroad, but we now move into a more fun part of the project. Celebrating John Paul II is like the easiest, most popular thing I think we've ever done. We solicited some stories that you guys have, people that have subscribed to the Loop, about John Paul II. And boy, did we get a fat list of stories. Everyone has a story because he's the best. Erika, do you have any favorites that you'd like to share? Maybe bring us up here.
Yeah, oh, there's so many. One came from a priest. So, Josh, do you know this as Father Rich Kunst? Is that how I say it?
Yeah, of course.
This came through Josh's email. Yeah.
Father Rich and I are good friends.
And I love this story, this just personal like encounter that he had with Pope John Paul II. He said, "I was blessed to be able to meet John Paul on several occasions. The first time was within 48 hours of my being ordained." I mean, what a gift, right? Ordination gift.
It's a good start.
Pope. Right after I was ordained in 1998, I accompanied my bishop on his ad limina visit to Rome in the hopes of being able to meet the Pope. As soon as we landed, we got notice to proceed immediately to the bronze doors of the papal apartment. I didn't even have time to change clothes or brush my teeth. As we're driving down to St. Peter's and then walking through the rooms of the papal apartment, I was rehearsing my lines to know exactly what I wanted to say to him. And when the time finally came for us to meet him, my bishop introduced me as having been ordained the day before. And I had the opportunity to say something. I could not spit out a word. He's just like dumbstruck in front of the Pope. So the Pope pointed at me and said, "You are too skinny." Imagine, like,
It's true. 20 years later, and he's still skinny. The guy is Father
Okay,
Rich.
Getting
good to
roasted
know.
by the Pope.
he owned that, right? John Paul II was a prophet. "You're too skinny." And then after several moments, we were about to leave. I finally choked out the words, "Your Holiness, I love you," not the words I had rehearsed. And he replied, "May God bless your priesthood." I loved that because it's just the humor of it. "You're too skinny," and that, "Your Holiness, I love you." I think so many of us just want to say that, and we can now. We can say that to John Paul II. "We love you."
That's awesome. I didn't
So I liked
I didn't
that
have
one.
a personal story with him. I mean, I relayed the story with Pope Benedict earlier, but my my friend Andrew Walther, may he rest in peace, he and I were living together in Connecticut, your stomping grounds there, Erika, and he said, this is in 1999, he turns to me and says, "Now, what do you think about this whole Y2K business, you know? Like, do you believe any of that stuff, the conspiracy things?" I'm like, I don't think so. I don't know why. What do you mean? He goes, "You know, the whole computer thing, like it's, you know, are the computers going to stop working? Is everything going to shut down?" I'm like, I don't know why. What are you getting at, Andrew? He's like, "Well, let's go to Rome." I go, wait. You're telling me you're concerned about the Y2K thing. You're worried about all the computers melting down, and you're recommending international travel? He says, "Yeah, come on, Italy. If the computers all go crazy and nothing works, we're in Italy. Nothing works there anyway. We'll be fine." I mean, I'm 22 years old, right? The logic's, hey, I'm up for it, right? I mean, I'm 40,
Makes sense.
I'm in my 40s now. I don't like to drive at night, but I'm 22. Yeah, let's go. So we get our tickets. We fly to Rome, and I didn't get a personal audience with them or anything like that. I was just one of the 100,000 people in St. Peter's Square on December 31st, 1999, as we come into the year 2000, and he comes out and waves to the crowd, and everyone goes bananas, and it was just cool to see. I mean, Pope John Paul II, I believe, has been seen by more humans than any other person ever. And the guy was just traveled all
That's
over
amazing.
the place. And so I got to go through the Holy Door for the Jubilee year. That was kind of cool. So, yeah, I mean, it was nice.
That's awesome.
This was another one that I really loved because it had to do with a family. So this was Nancy, and she wrote in, "My husband Mike and I and our 2 teen daughters were in Rome in 2007. My husband at the time had a coworker who had escaped Vietnam as a young boy via boat, and he had married a Vietnamese woman, and they were unable to conceive. They couldn't have children, so they applied for adoption in Vietnam. They wanted to adopt a Vietnamese child, bring him to America. They were very frustrated by the paperwork and the bureaucracy associated with the process. Don't get me started on that. Oh my gosh. So he asked Mike and I to pray for their adoption to go through more quickly while we were at the grave of John Paul II. Their last report was that it was going to be 2 years for it to all go through. We were at the tomb of St. John Paul II, and Mike wrote on a piece of paper asking for assistance to speed up the adoption. Upon our return to the United States, Mike learned at work that the adoption had a miraculous turn and they were picking up their daughter in 2 weeks. We don't believe this was a coincidence. Thank you, John Paul II, for all you did for us. And there are so many stories of how he's blessed families, seeking children, healings for children. He clearly had a heart for the family, not only in his writings, but now from heaven. So I loved that story too. There's so much joy there. What about you, Pogo? Because you were a baby when he died, right? So not to call you out on that.
What year? What year did he pass away?
So he passed away in 2005, as I was pregnant with my first baby.
Yeah, I was 7.
You were 7.
I was engaged.
So yeah, what does he mean to you? Like, because I grew up with him.
Yeah, I mean, so I've gone back now through his personal story, the history, and maybe I haven't encountered him as personally, I think, as many people probably listening to this have, but a few things really stick out. First, he was a man that dealt with tremendous suffering in his life, and you see him at the highlights and you almost can forget that because he was so joyful and vibrant. I mean, the man just had like an unbelievable personality. But I think, and I might be off on some of this, but most of his family died before he was an adult, right? I mean, I think his brother did, his mom did. He lived under brutal oppression. Yep. Communism had taken so much from him.
Nazism and communism
had taken a blow. Seriously, like he took just the amount of suffering in his life and yet how much joy he carried through that really is inspirational to me. I think he basically is credited for taking down communism, which is unbelievable. But the fact that they let him go back to Poland, the Russians let him go back to Poland is still just such a great story. And they definitely didn't want to, but they had to. Basically, there's going to be an uprising if they didn't let him go back. And he was just so inspirational to many. I think that sticks out. I think theology of the body was such a breakthrough for the world, but also for me, just encountering personally, is one of the. He just had such a distinct style of writing that had clarity, but also just had. It was charity and truth, I think, melded so well together. So I read that, and it just is inspiring to me in that. Oh my gosh, there's a clear plan that God has for sexuality that will bring you to heaven and make you happy. And I can't say I've read too much that has made me feel that way other than theology of the body. And then also the last thing that I remember personally, because I mean, I was young, but I remember this. He really, he was so humble in how he presented himself in his later years when he had what was it, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, or he was really deteriorating physically. Yeah. And the fact that he still went out so publicly and still traveled around the world and was still a vision of hope to a lot of people, even though he easily out of vanity could have hidden a lot of that, he chose not to and showed the dignity of basically dying with grace. I thought that was very inspirational. I distinctly remember that as a young child, like, wow, I can't believe he's doing this, even though I was pretty young. So all those 3 things really stick out to me personally. But the more stories I hear, I'm like, there's no shock. This guy's a saint. I mean, of course, like, pray for the Pope, but I long for that again. I long for a very public, inspirational figure for Catholicism that I feel like we've kind of been robbed of for the last 10 years.
To say it in a interesting way, when you think about, the way Catholics have, if you look at the history of Catholics over the last 60 or so years, and I include myself in this, with Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI, we got popes much, much better than we deserved. And we actually have a pope now that, anyway, what's next on the news docket? What are we talking about next?
You should move on.
pray for the Pope, but the Synod stuff hasn't been too inspirational.
Well, and then he had that, sister, what is her name, Gramick or whatever, with New Ways Ministry. And I mean, Pope Francis, again, he's talking about like, well, I'm not exactly blessing same-sex couples, but, maybe we will or won't, but we're not saying we're blessing all this kind of confusion. And then he brings this lady who's been spending the last, several decades promoting a view of human sexuality that is at odds with church teaching. So again, it's, what I liked about
what was JP2's tagline for World Youth Day?
Well, he had "Be not afraid" was sort of his papal tagline.
Right.
Like, stick it.
No.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid was what yes, he said that when he first came out on the balcony, but his papal motto is totally yours. Come on.
Totus tuus, for Mary,
Yep.
the Blessed Mother.
So
So beautiful.
I think what's frustrated me about the Synod and then the subsequent World Youth Day that we just came back to, and go to the website, the most bizarre language I've ever seen associated with the World Youth Day. We're not here to convert souls to Christ, that whole scandal. Like, Pope John Paul II was unapologetic about... Go ahead.
It's like Office. It's like the movie Office Space. It's like, then what is it
What
that you do here? I mean, get out of here. Go.
Right. What is it that you do here? Yeah. John Paul II, we convert souls to Christ.
Correct.
Done.
But it's not like, I think there's almost a weird negative connotation with converting souls to Christ. If you understand our faith and believe it as you should, converting a soul to Christ is the greatest gift you could offer to someone.
That's like a company being against sales.
Yeah, right. Like you're offering people eternal happiness through faith in Jesus Christ. That is a beautiful thing to give to someone else. So to treat it like World Youth Day, like we want to walk with all faith traditions and people without faith traditions, and we'll all walk together and we'll listen and we'll talk to them. I'm so tired of that. I'm just so tired of that.
It's like a grocery store.
Like we need to get
Hey,
back to...
you can shop here if you want to, but we're not going to, whatever. I mean, we're not into like selling stuff, whatever you want to do.
A grocery store would go out of business so quick.
Well, that's kind of what's happening in the West.
Feels like what's happening. But
Yep.
we gotta move on before it gets sad. But
Yeah.
we're gonna call it Josh's politics playground.
Here we go.
We have a lot going on in U.S. politics here, and we have questions for you. One, we have no speaker yet. As of recording, there's been one try. It hasn't worked. Do you think that Jim Jordan will become the speaker, and when do you think that will happen, if so?
I mean, the thing is, people are going to be listening to this, and the news might already have been dropped, but my gut reaction is that I think Jim Jordan might fall short. And I think here's why. I mean, it wasn't that he got like 7 or 8 or 9 votes short. It was that it was 20 votes short, and that becomes a little bit harder. And I think this is like, people would ask me, well, what do you think about, when Matt Gaetz and some of these conservatives were really upset with the way things are going in Washington and just decided to pull the pin and throw a grenade and blow this all up and get McCarthy out of there. And I'm like, well, I was conflicted. I admitted I felt conflicted. The reason I did is because after you blow everything up and you got to put the Legos back together, you still need to get 217 Republicans to agree on one person who will lead that, your team. And like the 20 or so liberal Republicans who, yes, they drive me crazy too, but you still need them to vote for, with you together, the whole caucus. You got to get somebody who can get their votes. You don't have 240 or 250 Republicans where you're going to tell those 10 moderates from New York and California, go pound sand. This is our guy. So you're kind of like, hey, now you got to rely on them to vote your way. And the conservatives are like, well, all we need is like 6 or 7 conservatives to vote no, and we can kick McCarthy out. Yeah, but guess what? Then all you need are 5 or 6 liberal Republicans like, I'm not going to play ball. And so you run this risk. That was my kind of concern with this. Ultimately, I think I would not be surprised if a group of moderates put forward a proposal that said, let's make this acting speaker, Patrick McHenry, let's give him more powers. We'll let him serve out 50 days or something like that, so we can vote on aid for Israel, so we can vote on budget stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I'm not saying I want that. I'm just saying if you get like 10 liberal Republicans, they could give that offer to the Democrats. The Democrats say, sure, it'll embarrass the GOP. We'll go for it. They'll love the chaos. So I wouldn't be surprised by that. I do think the conservatives, the 8 or 9 conservatives who kind of blew the thing up, have to get serious and try to figure out a way to make peace with these 10 or 11 liberals somehow. Make some kind of compromise. Otherwise, those 10 liberals are going to go to the 200 Democrats in the House and come up with some, 212, whatever it is. And it's not going to be fun.
And we'll get Hakeem Jeffries as the speaker.
I ultimately don't think they'll put him in power, but, they'll start saying, hey, we got some votes here, and they'll put something together. So anyway, that's my concern. That's my worry. And again, the thing is, once you created the situation where, if you don't have unity in January when you have the speaker election, and any 6 or 7 people can blow the thing up, well, then 7 liberals can blow this thing up. Even if you get Jim Jordan elected, they might say,
Right.
Okay, 5 months from now, you blew it up and you didn't like it. Well, we'll blow it up now. And
Right,
again,
you've opened that Pandora's box.
yeah. So you've invited a tactic. This has never been done before, where you vacate a
Right.
speaker. So
Well, it's like impeaching the president. Now, like, every president gets impeached. It's just the thing.
It could be,
That's
right.
how we wage war now,
Yeah.
right? And every speaker gets kicked out. That is not a good way to go.
right.
Not great.
Yeah, Jim Jordan,
I like him. I really like him. I'd love him speaker. Just to
I
be
know.
clear.
correct. But what I've seen historically is he likes throwing bombs. He's a hardline conservative. And almost sometimes I think that people like that aren't best suited in a place where you have to make compromises and you have to lead for everyone, because you kind of need someone that's on the right of that, continuing to push that line further right, instead of, there are people I think that probably wouldn't make great CEOs that are phenomenal on the team in a different position.
Right.
It's a really unique position to be in.
Jim Jordan's
To have to
great
be the
on the
House Speaker.
weaponization committee. I love him where he's at right now because he's done so much more for Catholics than Catholics in Congress have. So, like, in some ways, he's really, really in a great seat.
Republican voters have been super frustrated with the way Republicans in Washington have acted over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I totally understand that. But the fact is, you got to temper a little bit how you react to things. So if someone just, pulls a pin and throws a grenade to blow crap up, you have to stop and say, okay, wait a minute now. What's the plan? How is this going to help? I mean, sometimes you do need to kind of blow things up in a little chaos. I get it. That's what you were saying last time, Tom. I said, but you got to be careful about this because you may end up with a situation that's worse. And, if we get, the Democrats, proposing some sort of compromise thing in order to get government working again, that's not going to be helpful.
Government working. What is that?
What's the isn't the saying it's easier to build things or it's easier to tear things down than to build things? There's a more eloquent phrase
And there
somewhere
are some disenchanted, disenfranchised, super angry conservative voters who are just, I'm hell with it all.
Blow it all up.
Right.
Drain the swamp.
But the thing is, like, there are some people that are trying to actually do things that are advancing things your way, and you're just so cranky and just throwing grenades. You stop for a second. If you're in a battle, you're trying to win, don't blow, friendly fire isn't going to help. So
Next topic, Louisiana goes red with the governor. I didn't fully understand this. People are saying this is a big deal, but I don't really know why. Why is this a big deal?
Well, okay, so the way they have did you want to say that, Erika? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
Okay, so
Please teach me.
Louisiana has
Louisiana.
Bring it.
they call it a jungle primary. And so what happens is you can vote for, lots of candidates are running, and then what they usually then do is they take the top 2 candidates and then they do a runoff if someone doesn't get 50% of the vote, right? They do this now in California. And sometimes in California, some districts, both candidates are Democrats or both candidates are Republicans. So they do this in Louisiana. It's kind of a different system, but everyone was expecting Landry to eventually win the race, but they thought it was going to be a runoff between the top 2 candidates. He overperformed and just won the thing outright. So he didn't have to go on a runoff election. He got like 51% and no other, then you win. And why is this kind of a big deal? Well, Republicans dominate the Louisiana legislature, but John Bell Edwards has been the Democratic governor of Louisiana for the last 8 years. He's actually pro-life, so he signed really good pro-life bills, but he's terrible on LGBT stuff, and he's terrible against school vouchers. So he's not like one of us, quote unquote. And now he's term limited and he's done. He didn't run for re-election. And so Jeff Landry is very conservative. He gets elected. Now you have what they call the trifecta. You've got the House and the Senate and the governor's race, like I mentioned, all controlled by Republicans. We expect school choice to get passed. There are some bills that the legislature was able to override Edwards' veto on LGBT stuff, but others, they weren't able to override it. So those bills will come up and they'll be passed into law. So Louisiana is definitely going to move to the right, and because it's a conservative state and it's getting more conservative. So it'll be interesting to see that. But the most interesting thing I got out of this race actually is that voter turnout was very low for blacks in New Orleans. And why does this matter? I mean, it may or may not be indicative, but Joe Biden has counted on black support in a big way. He got, when he was running for president initially, he got like 7% of the vote in New Hampshire. He was like 5th place. Okay. He was doing terrible. And Nancy Pelosi was freaked out that Bernie Sanders was going to be the nominee. So she turns to Clyburn, the black Democrat from South Carolina. It's like, panic button. And he just says to all the voters in South Carolina, which the South Carolina Democratic primary is dominated by black voters, as you can imagine. And he says, Barack Obama picked Joe Biden. We need to pick Joe Biden. And boom, Joe Biden is resurrected and he becomes the Democratic nominee, right? So if he starts to slip support amongst black voters, not that a bunch of blacks are going to suddenly vote for, let's say, Trump if he's the nominee, but they might just stay home. They might not be as encouraged to vote. And that's what...
Like in 2016 with Hillary.
That's right. What happened in New Orleans in this gubernatorial race. There's black voters, so many of them just stayed home. It was like 30% came out and voted or something like that. And so Republicans romped the election in Louisiana on Saturday. So if that is carried through on the national level, it's lights out for Biden. But, again, it remains to be seen. But, Joe Biden isn't doing him any favors in winning the black vote because he's so radical on gender issues. And people are like, what? Like, people just kind of shake their heads at it. I think Biden is going to have a real tough time to try to recreate the coalition that got him elected in 2020. And part of it was, everyone voted from home. So many people voted from home in mail in 2020, and a bunch of suburban women turned to their husbands and said, "You better vote for. You're not going to vote for him again. Can't have Trump in there again. You vote for Biden." Well, hey, that's why I like it when you can vote in public and private and pull that, curtain behind you. And
I like the way, Josh, you just turned that around, because when women were fighting for the vote, the argument was, well, if women vote, they'll just all vote the way their husbands tell them to, so it will just double the number. But you just said that the women all tell their husbands how to vote. And in fact, that's probably
in the suburbs of Detroit and Milwaukee and Philadelphia.
Suburbs of New York here. Yeah.
I think so.
We moved Twilight Zone now. Josh and I are fighting over the same one, but Josh is on the sheet. Are you taking the video?
Yeah, I like this. I mean, so...
Okay, wait. Set it up for the audio listeners, and I'm going to play it.
All right. Now, I'm kind of a nerd, so I actually like to follow not just elections in the United States, but elections in Canada. And I know this guy, Pierre Poilievre, how you say his name, he's the leader of the conservative opposition in Canada. And I don't think they have elections until 2025. But if the Conservatives win, he would become the next Prime Minister of Canada, replacing, Fidel's son, Pierre Trudeau. So Pierre Poilievre is given this interview. He's being interviewed by this journalist, okay? And the journalist is totally not making any eye contact at all. And Pierre he's like in an orchard, and he's just biting and chewing on this apple. And the guy, this conservative Pierre guy, is just like so nonchalant, like Joe Cool about it. And I have to say, this is a master class in how to deal with a hostile reporter. And it's not even, it's like, he's like Socrates, because the reporter just has these completely loaded questions. And all Pierre has to do is go, "No, wait, what do you mean by that? You said
wait. Take notes.
We got to listen to this.
Roll the tape, Tommy.
Okay. On the topic, I mean, in terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess.
Emotions.
I mean,
What do you mean by that?
certainly you tap very strong ideological language quite frequently.
Like what?
left wing, this and that, right wing. I mean, it's that type of ideological thing.
I never really talk about left
But
or right.
anyways,
I don't really believe in that.
Okay, a lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but
Like who?
Like who?
I don't know who, but
Give me
Well,
names.
you're the one who asked the question, so
Yeah.
you must know somebody.
You ask questions.
I'm sure there's some out there. But anyways, the point of this question is, I mean,
He knows he's
why
got
should,
it now.
Why
This
should
is great.
Canadians
Yeah, he's smirking.
trust you with
Smiling.
their vote, given not just the sort of ideological inclination in terms of taking the page out of Donald Trump's book, but
What are you
also
talking about? What page? What page? Can
What
you give me
page?
the page?
I love that. What
keep
page?
saying
in terms of
You got a
turning
page
things
number?
quite dramatically in terms of Trudeau and the left wing and all of this. I mean, you make quite a it's quite a play that you make on it. So I'm
I'm not
just
sure.
wondering.
I don't know what your question
Okay,
is.
then forget that. Why should Canadians trust you with their vote?
Common sense.
Okay.
Common sense for a change. We're going to make common sense common in this country. We don't have any common sense in the current government. The guy prints $600 billion, grows our money supply by 32% in 3 years. That's growing the money 8 times faster than the economy. No wonder we have the worst inflation in 4 decades. I'm going to cap spending, cut waste, so that we can balance
Can
the
we make
budget
him
and bring
Speaker
down
of the
inflation
House?
and interest rates.
That was great.
Just
It's like the fifth
awesome.
time I've seen it.
what
I have to
page?
blow. This was not a raw reaction for me, but I was still almost crying, cracking up.
It's the best video I've seen in weeks. I mean,
Be specific.
Take notes.
Yeah.
Truly take notes. Yeah. What? Because the reason I
What are
wanted
you
to
talking
even, bring
about?
this one up. The reason I want to bring this one up is this totally has applications to speaking to people that just parrot talking points at you. I've had conversations with people that talk about how much they hate Trump and how bad he is. I'm like, okay, well, what do you not like about him? And or do you have a specific policy that frustrated you? People never have answers. They just take what's given to them. And if they ever criticize you for, oh, you kind of talk in a populist tone, like, okay, what do you mean by that? What have I said? Like, there's never answers. They're just trying to set the ideological frame of the conversation to put you at a disadvantage. Take it away. I mean, that's exactly what this guy did. It was just so.
And this conservative from Canada never was raising his voice, wasn't ever screaming. So he
No.
didn't go the Trump route where he's like foaming at the mouth and screaming. And I like Trump, okay, so I'm not trying to say that negatively. But he's just like casually swatting this fly away. It's like, go, shoot.
Chewing on his apple.
While chewing
that was
an apple.
priceless prop.
So good, dude.
That's
So
great.
good. Yeah, you want to talk about not concerned? The level of not concerned is chewing on an apple during an interview. I mean, the reporter couldn't even look at him. If you want to see it, it's up. This will be up on YouTube. We're reacting to it. If you want to check out YouTube, Catholic Vote, search Catholic Vote. You'll see us there. Send a like, send a subscribe. Erika, should I wait? Because this is Erika's Twilight Zone because it relates to her. However, I observed it from the outside. Erika is
You're
famous,
taking my
Twitter
Twilight
famous, kind
Zone.
of. But this is, it's not fair for you to really say it because
Okay.
she shared with us that Father James Martin liked a tweet that she put out.
What?
It's true. It's true. I was fired last week by Josh because fortunately I'm still here, so I think he forgave me. But yes, I have
Yeah.
arrived in Catholic
Mercy.
Toyland, and
What can I say?
yeah, thank you, mercy, divine mercy.
What could you possibly have tweeted that got liked by Father James Martin?
Right. So I open up my notifications page and I see this big heart, and next to the big heart is Father James Martin's face. He liked my reply, and my first reaction was this: oh my gosh, I've said something heretical, like I'd done something terribly wrong.
Or stupid.
But what I had done is there was a picture of Father James Martin at this table at the Synod having a conversation in the spirit or something. And there was a list of the people at his table, and his group, there was like a liberal, nun. There was a guy who's like spouted off heresy about LGBTQ. And then there's Father James Martin. So like it was all this kind of a group. And the person who'd done the original tweet had tagged Father Martin as he was listing the people there. So I just responded to the tweet and said, I'm sure there's no foregone conclusions here. They're just listening to the spirit together. And I meant it sarcastically. And Father James Martin hearted it Because he was, I don't think he really understood.
Or
what
he
was
did,
going on.
and he's just like, this is an opportunity
Yeah.
for me to go
This is great. Yeah.
He's playing 4D chess.
Yeah,
I think he's
4D
playing 4D
chess.
chess on you.
Well, I'm out of my league then because I'm terrible at chess in any form. But it was a great moment. I seriously had this like anxiety reaction of like all of my hormones went, I did something terribly wrong. I was duly fired by Josh and got lots of love. But yes, that was my Twilight Zone moment. The heart and Father James Martin's face in my notifications.
A mob of LOOPCast devotees called in and said this. Yeah, you had to be saved.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the,
You were
getting me my job
exonerated.
back.
So I have a couple options then for Twilight Zone. First being that the CCP dipped out of the Synod. The Chinese bishops are leaving early. And they,
They're gone.
Someone
left.
tweeted nothing worth spying on. Even CCP have a boredom threshold.
Yeah, Damien
And
sounds
I thought that was probably-
awesome.
That was a great
Appropriate.
reaction.
And then my other Twilight Zone was I just saw a picture of people around a table at a Synod meeting. And well, first off, there's a really bizarre artwork going on in there. Like it's a really weird.
Yeah,
It almost
that's
looks a
been
little
there
demonic.
since
It's
the
scary.
70s. Yeah.
That's weird. 1, 2, they're all sitting at a table, and I noticed one person looked different than the other. And he looked a lot like the person that liked Erika's tweet. He was sitting around the table with everyone else, but with a mask on.
No.
And so really nice to see he cares about COVID. But the Twilight Zone to all of this was, I remember not too long ago when it was thought that if anyone had COVID or there's a COVID scare of any time, that an event had to be shut down. Especially masses had to be shut down for a while because if there was a COVID scare, no weddings, no funerals, none of that.
Certainly
But-
people from all over the world congregating in one place would be a bad idea.
Right.
Right?
Could be a COVID scare, but and COVID, I guess, did go through the Synod or whatever, but it seems as though it's less important now to be safe and not touch each other and not have these things go on. But the Synod was more important here than it was to us normal people, in America going to us radical American Catholics. I just thought that was very hypocritical COVID treatment going on right now. And some can say, well, and I'm sure they have all their boosters, would be my 2 cents, although it's now boosters have actually been proven pointless. That all being said, the Synod stuff's been crazy. The one thing, the final Twilight Zone point I had was I saw a report, and we are not fans of. We actually did a whole episode about how evil and malicious MindGeek, the company that owns Pornhub, is, and so they now apparently, and this is the Twilight Zone, are kind of beacons of geopolitical morality. They want a very popular performer came out very publicly pro-Hamas. She's Palestinian. She's from the area. And so MindGeek decided to take all of the residuals she'd be earning, all the earnings from her videos, take that, freeze the account, take whatever she would be earning and donate it to Israel. So I don't know what they thought. I think they kind of put this out in a press release thinking that they'd get some kudos. We live in such a weird world now where basically the epicenter of human trafficking and child pornography that is so bad and malicious that they can't even take that down. Credit cards don't even want to work with them because they can't even regulate on their site. We're quick enough to take earnings from a pro-Hamas person and give them to Israel is so unbelievably shocking and vile to me that this is their priority, not all the child pornography found on their site.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure a porn star would be one of the first targets of Hamas violence. So the irony that she's like all pro-Hamas, you're like, lady, you show up in Gaza in your outfit and you have 5 minutes to live. It's just
and the hope too, there's starting to be lawmakers in Canada that are wanting to put the pressure on that company because they're based in Montreal and they're just a force for evil, obviously, in the world. So we got to continue to pray for all the victims of that. Everyone in that whole thing is a victim. Some are more malicious than others.
Well, that does it for this episode of LOOPCast. What are I don't have my reviews in front of me.
You always like to do the reviews things. I mean, the reviews. I mean, you know what I'm more thankful for? Not
Dude,
the review.
It gets people to share.
Industry standard,
Just
babe.
stop it for a second, okay? The thing that I talk to people about podcasts, like, you know, there's for podcasts, it's like if you get to 10,000 listens, it's like that's like the watermark. Below that, and you're just a scrappy little kid trying to get something to happen. You get over 10,000, and then you're kind of a big deal or whatever. You know, not that you're the next Joe Rogan. And that's why I want to thank our audience. Like, we have been consistently, you know, well above that. And I'm thankful to our audience for listening to Erika's insights and anything that Tom might say too. So thank you very much. Obviously, share, do the review thing too, because it makes Tom happy. Just can't have just Tom's mom on there making comments. So, you know,
She's created so many burner accounts now. It's like she's running out of fake email addresses.
right.
We love you, Janet.
Yeah. No, we've been a critical mass, and like I always enjoy when people share this, but we're going to be moving to a new YouTube channel. Stay tuned on that. We're going to be doing some fun branding things, so updating our copy in certain places, because what we've developed into is so beyond what I ever thought we would be when we first started this. And so, yeah, we're just grateful for the support.
Why do you say that? I
We
mean,
continue
I'm
doing
on the
this.
show. Come on, of course it's going to be a
That's
hit.
right. We knew it would be big. Right?
Star, yeah. Josh's confidence is unmatched for sure.
Midwest self-confidence.
But yeah,
Gotta have that.
that's right. Grateful. So pray for us. And as we sign out always, Our Lady of Guadalupe, St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis. Pray for us. We'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.